You know everything you need to know about the impacts and opportunities resulting from the FDA's new ASCA pilot program? If the answer is no, then join us on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Our Device Talks Tuesday episode brought to you by Intertech will answer these questions and more. Go to DeviceTalks.com to register. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Hey everyone, this is Tom Salami. Welcome to this week's episode of the Device Talks Weekly Podcast. Thanks for joining us. We have a lot of learning going on today. First, we're going to hear from Dr. Nick West. He is Abbott's CMO and Divisional VP of Global Medical Affairs at its vascular business. Sean Hooley, Associate Editor of Mass Device, will talk with Dr. West about their coronary imaging platform and its use of AI. Great conversation by Sean. Later on, I'll speak with Mike Carrel. He is the CEO and President of Atricure. I learned a lot about Afib. I'm sure you will as well. And I know you'll enjoy Mike Carrel's story. Plus, we'll hear from our friends at FlexN. Now, with all that said, let's go. Chris Newmarker has taken a few well-deserved days off, but since the suits at 30 Rock say we need to trend younger, we decided we'd bring in some younger talent, namely Sean Hooley, Associate Editor of Mass Device. Sean, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. Talent is a very generous word there, but I'll take it.
You're gonna bring in the young folks, Sean. You got to talk what TikTok. What is it you young people are doing now? Snapdragon Chat or something like that.
I'm all over those. Don't you worry about that.
Plus, you have your. I don't have the video up on Zoom, but you have your quirky soccer allegiance too, right? Liverpool, is that it?
I do that.
There it is.
Yeah.
There's the flag.
Yep.
So, how did you come to love that team again?
Well, believe it or not, being Massachusetts born and raised, the ownership group of the Red Sox 2010 bought Liverpool. And so I thought, well, if ever there was a time to pick a team, now is the one where there's a slight connection. So
wow.
I went through about eight or 9 years of nothing. And then the past couple of years have been very good to me. So it's worked out in the long run.
And did you take to the streets with a torch when they announced the Super League?
That was when I thought maybe I shouldn't be telling people that the reason I got into this was because they did everybody dirty there. But
the passion behind that inspired me to adopt an athletic club of my own, the Athletic Club of Bilbao, Spain, where my people are from a long time ago. So
they have a Basque players only rule, I believe. Do
they really?
They only want people from the Basque region to play for them, something like that. Yeah,
I did not know that. Go Lions! Woo! I haven't really invested a lot of time into it, but I do follow them on Twitter. So hopefully my passion will build.
That's how it all starts.
All right. Well, you have, I'm sure, quite ably put together this week's Newsmakers. So let's take it from the top. What's number 5 on the big list, Sean?
Number 5 is Google launching its first medical device, or planning to launch its first medical device.
Really?
Yeah, it's an AI-based tool for identifying dermatologic issues. Basically, you use your smartphone, smart device to take pictures of skin, nail, and hair related issues. And the AI interface has all sorts of references that is able to they made it very clear it does not diagnose you, but it sort of points you in the right direction and tells you what may be wrong with you, and then you can kind of take it from there. But yeah, that's Google's kind of foray into its first medical device.
So basically, Google has developed an app that'll help all those doctors who are eating at restaurants and strangers come up to them and ask, "Hey, does this rash look weird to you?" or something like that. That's what
That's very Larry David. I feel like he's the only person that's doing that. But
well, I think we have an app that'll also identify trees. So it sounds like it's along those lines. Well, that's very cool, though. That'll be handy to have. I know what I get all the time, which is poison ivy. But if there's something stranger, then clearly this will be helpful to have. All right. Well, it's great to have Google on there and be interesting to see where they go from here in the medical device field. What is number 4 on the big newsmakers list?
Number 4, we have another, do we call them SPAC or SPAC, special purpose?
We go with SPAC. In fact, we have sound. SPAC attack.
SPAC attack.
SPAC attack. SPAC attack.
Yeah, so a SPAC, Special Purpose Acquisition Corporation, is potentially going to merge with Mimic Innovative Surgery and bring the company public. It's a medtech acquisition corp. Reportedly, Bloomberg reported that Mimic and Medtech Acquisition Corp are looking to merge to bring Mimic, which develops the Hominis FDA-approved robotic-assisted surgical device for performing transvaginal hysterectomies, looking to bring that company public. So yet another SPAC acquisition and yet another robotic surgery company kind of moving forward too.
Yeah. No, we had their chairman, Maurice Ferre, the founder of Mako, one of the founders of Mako, on the podcast about a month and a half ago, talking about their efforts. So they, like Vicarious, who we've also had on the podcast before, very early stage, but finding ways into the public markets for through the SPAC. So it's going to be with all the big players going in this space, and now these companies having some funding behind them. I assume both would be acquired by a larger OEM at some point, but be interesting to see where the story follows. All right, we're going to take a break from the New Markets Newsmakers list because this is where we play our first interview. It's usually our opening keynote interview, but we're going to do something a little differently this time around. We're going to dive a little deeper into some new technology and our own. Oh, it's Sean Hooley. Sean, you did this interview. Tell us a bit about your conversation with Nick West.
I did do this interview, and apologies in advance to anyone who likes his style along the lines of what Tom does versus what I did here. But yeah, so it came about last month. Abbott announced that it launched its AI-powered coronary imaging platform in Europe after it won CE mark approval. The Ultron software merges optical coherence tomography, OCT, with artificial intelligence to enhance visualization and detect the severity of calcium-based blockages and measure vessel diameter, is what the company explained. And Dr. West will go into further detail, but basically what the goal is using near infrared light to offer high definition, precise imaging from within a blood vessel. And Dr. West explains kind of how this works, what the applications of it are, and just how, obviously everything's moving in the direction of artificial intelligence, of AI. So it's definitely an interesting chat. And he was very engaging, very fun to talk with.
It was a great conversation and haha about not having Tom do the interview, but I think it's great to have your perspective in this because you really do a good job of getting him to talk about the AI and the applications, and you picked up on some interesting stuff.
Plus, as you mentioned earlier, the Liverpool banner behind me, that was the first thing he noticed. And prepare yourself, he is English. And the first thing he saw when he logged onto Zoom was the banner, and joked that he couldn't actually talk to me because he's a supporter of Tottenham Hotspur. We got past it. It might come up in the interview. I'm not sure if that was on the recording or not, but
it was at the end. I was going to reference that. I'm glad you remember that. Yeah, you really need to, when you do these interviews, here's a little tip. Let's try not to deeply offend our guests with our sports paraphernalia behind us. We're lucky he's such a tolerant man.
Very grateful, and he promised to chat again in a year. So.
Before we get into our opening conversation, I'd like to bring back Mike Heuris, the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Flexan. Mike, we talked last week about what Flexan does. I understand you work well with OEMs through your Flexecution strategy. Tell us a bit about it.
And it really is, three elements of our business. The first is design, develop, and deliver. The design portion is, from a commercial perspective, we're picking the right partners where there's a strong need for our services. And it's really important upfront to align those needs with our capabilities and, most importantly, our experiences. And once we engage with customers, we understand what their manufacturing needs, whether it's new product development or it's a manufacturing transfer. And that allows us to then get the rest of the organization and do a comprehensive overview of what that solution would look like. And especially in today's environment, given the stringent quality requirements, especially if you're dealing with a class 3 implantable component, as well as the ever-changing environment within the regulatory space. So having that upfront engagement and really understanding the needs before you even get to the economics is absolutely critical. And if you do that really well and you build those experiences and you build that working relationship, because it is a working relationship as an extension of their organization, we found that to be really the recipe for success with us. Obviously, great communication, achieving timelines, achieving cost targets, and making sure that service aspect of it is really addressed. That makes for a really fruitful relationship because they're counting on us. Our customers are counting on us to really be an extension of their organization, as I mentioned, but to really deliver. And so if we do that well, there's certainly more opportunity to grow within that relationship. And that's really been a successful model for us.
For more information, go to flexan.com. That's FLEXAN.com. All right, well, let's hear from Nick West. He's the Chief Medical Officer and Divisional Vice President of Global Medical Affairs at Abbott. Sean, you sort of opened up this interview just giving him the floor, so to speak. What was your opening question?
Yeah, I just wanted him to explain to me, the background of the technology and exactly what it does, and just kind of give someone who does not have the MD at the end of his title the lowdown on just how it works, and help me and potentially help the listener understand exactly what it does.
What you've been hearing about is the new software version of our optical coherence tomography intracoronary imaging platform. Now, I'll just explain what that is for a minute. So when people have invasive coronary procedures, such as placement of coronary stents, which can be during a heart attack, or for patients who have long-standing conditions like angina due to coronary artery narrowings, generally speaking, historically, it's been guided by X-ray only. And that's been fine. The problem is when you use X-rays only, you don't get lots of detailed information about the vessel. So technologies have been developed that can give the cardiologist an inside view of the coronary artery itself prior to and after the stent has been deployed. And our optical coherence tomography system is one of those. It uses near infrared light to reflect off the structures in the vessel wall to allow cardiologists precise measurements and get lots of information about the composition of these narrowings. And you may say, well, a narrowing's a narrowing, but of course, some of these narrowings are very hard, calcified, like limescale in a pipe or a kettle, and some of them are much softer, like blancmange or sago pudding. So what is new about our new software platform is that we already have this technology is available and it's used worldwide by cardiologists. But what we have done, we have created a completely new user interface and experience, and critically, we've made it much simpler. One of the major barriers to uptake is the complexity, or at least the perceived complexity of this technology. So we've tried to make it accessible to even people who are not experts. And one of the key things that I should probably mention is we've used the benefit of artificial intelligence to allow the software to take key measurements and detect key things like vessel calcification automatically. So there's no prior sort of training. You don't have to be eagle-eyed. When I say don't say no prior training, you don't need quite as much expert training because the software will tell you not exactly what to do, but will give you a huge amount of information without expert inside knowledge, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so, the AI is obviously, such a crucial component of this and something that everyone is moving forward with. So how does it kind of deviate from the traditional methods, aside from obviously, allowing for less intensive training,
Sure.
and moving this area, this imaging space forward?
Okay, so the advantage of using these intracoronary imaging modalities, and not everyone does it. If you look worldwide, certain geographies use it a lot, use imaging a lot. That's both intravascular ultrasound, which is an ultrasound technology, or optical coherence tomography, the light-based one that I described that we at Abbott manufacture. In Japan, about 95% of coronary procedures are guided by some form of intracoronary imaging. In Europe, the average is somewhere around 10, maybe 12%. In the US, it's higher than that, and it's rising. So this is a good thing for patients. You're going to say, why is it a good thing? Well, it's a good thing because it enables cardiologists to be more precise. We want patients to get the right size of stent. They come in many sizes. We want the narrowings to be treated properly. And we want the result to be excellent after the stent has gone in. And you can't always get that information from the angiogram. But what's different about our platform and where the AI comes in is that, yes, there are various key features when you use these technologies that people need to recognize. Now, one of the key ones when you're treating a coronary narrowing is this business of calcification. So the longer you have any disease process in the body's natural response is to lay down calcium, like limescale. And of course, if you're treating a narrowing that has lots of limescale, it's very hard. Just blowing a balloon up, which is the standard precursor to a stent, may not be enough to modify that narrowing properly. So whilst an expert can detect and quantify with their eyes and their brain the amount of calcification by sort of pattern recognition and training, people who've not been well trained or not well experienced may not pick up those cues. So the first thing we've done is integrate an algorithm taught by artificial intelligence that detects and quantifies calcification. Now you may say, well, that's so what? What are you going to do differently? Well, you kind of reach a decision point. Generally speaking, when you prepare a narrowing, it's a balloon. If there's a limited amount of calcification, however, you may go for a special kind of high pressure or what we call non-compliant balloon. If there's lots of narrowing, lots and lots of calcification in the narrowing, you may go for a dedicated debulking strategy. And there are devices that spin at thousands of revs per minute covered in diamond chips that are used to debulk these very hard narrowings. So that's very important because the stent won't deploy properly, it won't expand properly if you haven't prepared the lesion, the narrowing in the first place. So having that ability to detect the calcification and quantify it to alter your decision-making is absolutely key. The other thing it can do is it can detect the vessel size very accurately. Now, you would think the vessel size is easy, but you rely on what's called the external elastic lamina, which is, if you like, it's like a rubber band in the vessel. And in your vessels, well, I hope in your vessels, and certainly in my vessels, there's not much difference between the external elastic lamina and the diameter of the inside tube. But in patients with coronary heart disease, what happens is the inner layer of the vessel, what we call the intima, grows inwards and begins to narrow and occlude the actual artery. So detecting that external elastic lamina to choose the right diameter stent is critical. We're generally very bad at that. Our software will do it automatically. So I've talked in detail about two things, but if I just summarize it holistically, it allows physicians much easier access to make the kind of decisions that we know impact patient outcomes. And we see this as really important. Innovation to drive improved outcomes and personalize patients' healthcare experiences.
Yeah, that was, one of my questions I'd hope to ask was about the decision making. If you could just kind of explain exactly, what the impact of this enhanced decision making is on the patient outcome, how much it improves the patient outcome. I don't know if you have data that backs it up comparatively speaking to, other devices, but.
So ask me again in about a year and a half's time, but I'll talk around it a bit more than that. I joke slightly. So recently we embarked on a study called Illumian 4, which is the fourth in a series of Illumian trials examining the utility of OCT in patients undergoing stent procedures. And the Illumian 4 study compared people in a randomized fashion who had stents guided by optical coherence tomography, the previous version without the AI, I would note, against angiography, the standard, just the X-ray guidance. Now, that study finished recruiting just at the end of last year and will report at the end of next year. But we are pretty confident, given previous experience we have, we know already that OCT will give you a better stent expansion. So stents are much more likely to be better expanded when they're guided by intravascular imaging and in particular OCT. And we think that this will translate to reduced events in the future. It's been shown for other platforms. Intravascular ultrasound has been around a lot longer. It's much less user-friendly in many ways, but that has similar data. And we know that you get better stent expansion even than intravascular ultrasound, at least numerically in terms of the numbers, although it's not statistically significant. So we believe that the use of OCT will drive reduced events. And the reason for that really is all around the expansion of the stent. you can put a stent in, but the stent is like a spring that goes in on a balloon. You blow the balloon up, it deploys the spring. But if you just use the angiogram, which is just a squirt of dye and a two-dimensional representation on an X-ray, you're not going to get that granular information that you would get by actually going into the vessel with one of these imaging catheters and really seeing that this device is properly expanded and pushed against the vessel wall. And what we do know already from lots of studies in the past is the primary cause of stents failing, which includes either re-narrowing or clotting off due to a blood clot, is under expansion. So I don't have definitive trial evidence yet. There's a whole bunch of circumstantial evidence. And in fact, we have some real world evidence, so retrospective data looking at patients treated with OCT compared with angiography. We are confident that our randomized trial will show the same thing. So in terms of outcomes, we're reasonably confident, but that's in the post, so to speak. In terms of decision making, we already have some good data from a project in the US called the Light Lab project, which is looking at real world utilization of OCT and how it can impact both physician behavior, workflow in the labs, and the kind of expansion you get with a stent.
Great. Yeah, I look forward to a year from now when you can share that. I'll hold you to it.
Okay.
So yeah, in announcing the system's launch in Europe, the company mentioned its use with the Dragonfly OpStar imaging catheter. So I wondered if you could kind of explain the tandem, the partnership between those devices and how they work together on the complex patient anatomies.
Sure. So as you say, we've recently obtained CE mark. And so the European launch was literally it's been lots of excitement. I'm speaking to you from the UK right now. I'm going to see some cases later in the week, and a lot of my former colleagues are very excited about what they've seen and how they've been able to interact with the software, the additional insights they've got. Whilst we have had an excellent imaging catheter before, as you say, the Dragonfly OpStar is the latest iteration in this regard. Now, there have been some criticisms around the previous catheter. It's difficult to put a lot of technology in something that's very, very small that has to go into the coronary artery, to be fair. But we have exerted some meaningful change. Now, when we talk about complex coronary anatomy, it encompasses a wide variety of ills. It can talk about disease in multiple vessels, disease, what we call bifurcations or branch points in the coronary anatomy, heavily calcified lesions that we've been talking about, lesions that's a narrowing with a lot of disease over a long length. So all of these things make it trickier for these devices to navigate their way through the anatomy. And what we had feedback about from the previous platform was that sometimes in these very complex anatomies where the benefit of imaging is even greater than for straightforward narrowings that are treated, the device did not perform as well as people had hoped. So we have made some mechanical improvements to the catheter to enable it to get through some of these anatomies in a better fashion. But critically, we've also made the imaging part of it, the lens and the light sources, brighter. Now that's great because it provides nice, clear images for the clinician. And although it doesn't need it, it makes the AI that much easier to process. Clinicians will find it much easier to see things as well. So we think this is good, as in you get a brighter picture. And if you've seen the images, you'll know that they're predominantly black and either gold or, as we call it, platinum, which is kind of black and white or grey. But you'll get a much brighter image that you can see more clearly what's going on, coupled with the fact that the device is now much more deliverable and will cross these complex anatomies to deliver that maximum benefits to the patients.
Great. Are there other applications in which you've been looking at using this imaging system, using the AI, maybe within your department at Abbott, maybe outside of it, but wherever, I'm sure, like I said, AI is so popular now that it's got to be going everywhere, right?
Well, AI is a terrible buzz phrase, and I almost hate saying it because everyone just says, when they say what you're doing and you say AI, and it's kind of like one of these terms you just kind of chuck it out, and it's meant to say that we are forward looking, but we are using AI in lots of other places as well. We're using it to look at some of our clinical trial data, but looking specifically at this platform and where else we could use it. Before I make any comment about that, I would say the FDA labeling for this device in the United States is for coronary use only. So I won't just leave it at that, but I would not endorse its use anywhere else. Now, we know that it is or has been used in other territories. And of course, as a member of the vascular division of Abbott, the other bit of the blood vessels that we find is quite a potentially interesting target might be the lower limb vessels. We know that people have published data on use of OCT in the lower limb vessels. We are particularly interested at the moment in managing what we call critical limb ischemia, which is disease in the arteries below the knees. It's also fair to say that people have published experiences using the OCT catheter in many other vascular beds also. There are some specific things about OCT which makes it probably more suitable for arteries with a relatively small diameter. For example, using an aorta, which is the main artery in the chest, which is centimeters in diameter, it'd be very difficult to get good OCT images in that. But if you're in the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe even 8 millimeter space, those are the diameter, those are the kind of vessels that one could potentially image. And I think I would say to you again, you will need to watch this space, but I would again emphasize that the FDA labeling is for use in the coronaries only, and using it off that is a bit like skiing off piste.
Fair enough. All right. Yeah. That's, the gist of the questions I had for you. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to expand on or particularly wanted to mention. No,
I think that's, I think, I would just, this is to me, I mean, I was a practicing interventional cardiologist I've just told you I supported Tottenham Hotspur, but I was actually practicing in Cambridge. We used a lot of OCT, and I kind of wish I'd had these features, because having grown up with the OCT platform and having to teach myself what I was seeing, having to deal with all these sort of upgraded menus, which eventually, and no disservice to St. Jude and then Abbott after it, became slightly cluttered. I mean, if you imagine, if you're flying a biplane, there's not many switches in the cockpit of a biplane, but there are lots of switches in the cockpit of a jumbo jet. And the problem is that the front end of the OCT system had become a bit like a jumbo jet. And if you started when it was a biplane, you understood where everything was. But if you came into it cold, teaching colleagues on the system that we used to have was very tricky, because it had become very complex and counterintuitive. And this platform, as it stands, it's going to enable the dissemination of this technology to kind of any end user. And that's the key. There are many barriers and resistances to using any new technology. And you know that in working in the innovation field, there's perceived ease of use and perceived benefit. And we've talked around some of these issues already. The perceived benefit bit is important, and that's where our clinical trial data comes in. Perceived ease of use is critical. If it's difficult and it's fiddly, people won't use it. They may use it once, and they won't use it again. So getting over that hurdle of it's not complex, it's not just for experts, and it will improve your patient outcomes is absolutely critical. So, if people latch onto the AI thing and want to be a part of that, that's great. If they like that concept, it does exert meaningful change, and we have more features that we will develop in coming years.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and really appreciate all the information. And despite recent rivalry, I wish Tottenham all the best for your sake.
Thank you. That's very kind. And the same for Liverpool, obviously.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you. And like I said, hopefully a year from now, we can catch up again. Yeah,
that'd be great. Nice to meet you, Sean.
All right, Sean. Well, that was terrific. Great. This was your debut interview, right, on the podcast? You've been on as a co-host before, but is this the first conversation you've had?
I believe so. Maybe some snippets from previous interviews have been used before, but never the whole shebang.
Excellent. Well, you'll see the pay raise in your next paycheck for sure.
I better.
Because podcasters, we make all the big bucks. We sure do. So great job, though. Thank you for making those interviews, and we'll continue to bring some of these these deeper dive looks at some really cool medical device technology. But now it's back to the grindstone. Sean, what's number 3 on the big new markers newsmakers list?
Number 3, we have Teleflex selling some respiratory assets to Medline. Teleflex announced that it's going to sell a significant portion of its respiratory business to Medline Industries for $286 million. This is all part of a previously announced restructuring plan during last month's quarterly earnings report. It's the product lines being divested include oxygen aerosol therapy, active humidification, and non-invasive ventilation and intensive spirometers. They expect the acquisition to close in the third quarter of this year. And Teleflex is looking, as part of the restructuring process, to use some of the proceeds to pay down debt and support its growth strategy.
Awesome. Great. Well, important news there. All right. Bring us into number 2 on the big NN.
Number 2 was written by our missing colleague, Chris Newmarker. The headline is renal denervation back as a high blood pressure treatment? And it comes on the back of Medtronic reporting what it said is clinically significant and sustained blood pressure reduction among nearly 3,000 people with uncontrolled hypertension that were treated with the company's Simplicity renal denervation system. Basically, they reported these results at the 2021 EuroPCR annual meeting. A couple of other companies reported some positive data with renal denervation, and it seems like it's sort of on the rise as the treatment for high blood pressure.
That's great. Yeah, that's a story we're continuing to follow. Chris and I have talked about it before, the acquisition of Ardian by Medtronic back in 2011, and Ardian being one of those really early stage medtech companies that came together, built around some early surgeries in a thesis or a theory written in a paper, and they built a company and a therapeutic approach about it. So it's exciting to see that it's actually making progress, and I hope we'll see a regulatory approval in the near future. It'll be great news for folks with drug-resistant hypertension. So, all right, well, bring us into the big number 1 on Newmarker's Newsmakers.
Number 1, we've already talked about this company. It's not related to Dr. Nick West, but Abbott won the CE mark for its Navitor TAVI platform, transcatheter aortic valve implantation system, for treating severe aortic stenosis in people who are at high or extreme surgical risk. Basically, aortic valves are all the rage, as we've known and covered on Newmarker's Newsmakers plenty of times, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so this particular system has what Abbott says is a unique design for preventing blood leaking around the valve. So there's a less invasive alternative to surgical aortic valve replacement. It features Abbott's NaviSeal fabric cuff that works with the cardiac cycle to reduce or eliminate the backflow of blood. The company says it's the only self-expanding TAVI system with intraannular leaflets and large frame cells that are designed to improve access to critical coronary arteries and facilitate future interventions to treat coronary artery disease. And it's just another, step forward in heart valves and all that. It's always a popular space.
Absolutely. No, I know. And I know Medtronic had some news this week too about their Evolute TAVR. I know you were considering that for the list as well. So lots of movement in the aortic valve replacement space.
Definitely.
Before we get into this keynote conversation, I want to let you know we dropped another episode of the Medtronic Talks podcast. I got a chance to speak with Giovanni DiNapoli. He is the head of the gastrointestinal business unit at Medtronic. To hear what he has to say, go to DeviceTalks.com or find Medtronic Talks on any podcast platform. Well, Mike Carrel, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Tom.
It's great to see you. And we would love to learn a little bit about our guests' backgrounds, most specifically how they found their way into medtech. And reading your background, seems like you came into medtech a bit early in your career, but not right from the start. What was your transition into medtech?
Yeah, my transition was I was actually in technology in general. I was with in the kind of wireless and software space before, and sold that business. And one of my board members was on the board of a medical imaging company called Vital Images. And that was kind of the beginning of my move into healthcare. I used to say to myself, oh yeah, those people in healthcare, they all say they're mission driven. And I didn't understand it. I'm like, I'm not, what I'm doing is great too. And I could get really excited about it. And then I joined Vital Images and I realized, wow, now I understand what a true mission driven company is all about. One that really kind of focuses on patient care, and Vital Images was that. And that was kind of my transition into it. I started out as a chief operating and financial officer at Vital Images and then kind of progressed my career from there.
That's a great perspective, man. I do feel like sometimes we puff ourselves up a little bit and feel like we're saving lives personally. But what is the difference to you between the two companies? What is it? Is just the overarching knowledge that what you're doing is either going to or is getting people better, or is it something deeper than that?
I think it's a little bit of both. Meaning, what I mean is that, yes, what you just described, what you're doing is helping people, and you're helping people get better and improve their lives. And that really becomes something that is in the DNA of most companies that are in the medical device space. But also the people that you interact with are doing the same. So every day you're talking to a physician and you're always kind of working with them. And when you work with these physicians, they've just got great perspective on how to care for patients and improve lives. And that doesn't exist if you're selling software per se. Sure, I'm making it go faster, and that's really cool, and it's super important for society, but there is just a different kind of take to it. And it's been a lot of fun to be a part of it. I'm really glad that the community welcomed me, and been doing it now for almost 20 years.
And you were president and CEO of Vital Images, or did you become CEO later? I thought I heard you say you were CFO. Maybe I misheard.
I started out in the financial and operations side of Vital Images, and then I became CEO and did that for 3 years before we sold the business to Toshiba. Mm-hmm. And it basically became the medical imaging group within Toshiba that's now Canon. And then I left shortly thereafter and came to Atricure.
And where did you go? Did you go directly from Vital Images to Atricure? Is that what you said?
I did, yeah. I had a period of time in between where I was trying to figure out what was going to be the next kind of journey of my life. And Atricure came a calling, and I've been there ever since, almost over 8 years now, and just love it.
Well, let's talk a bit about the company. Speaking in the context of what drew you to Atricure, and then within that, answering that question, tell us what Atricure does.
So what drew me to Atricure was I got a phone call out of the blue from a friend saying, hey, there's this company. I'd always been a part of publicly traded companies, so that is really focused on atrial fibrillation, and my mom had atrial fibrillation. I thought, wow, that's really kind of interesting. And the more I dove into it, the more I just got really excited about it. I had never, even though I'd been in healthcare for a little while, I'd never been through cardiac surgery or even into a procedure like that. And I did a lot of research on kind of what Atricure is all about, which was world-class, number one in its space relative to the products they made around atrial fibrillation. And that just got me really excited about kind of the core bones of what it was about. Two was, even as much as I loved Vital Images, Atricure was the most patient-focused business I'd ever been a part of. Everybody that you talked to was thinking about what is the actual impact on a patient. Testimonials from patients and from the physicians would introduce you to that. And during my diligence, I just fell in love with the company and the people that I met there. And nothing has been better than I expected, quite frankly.
What stage was the company when you joined in 2012? It had gone public, I believe, in 2005. It had been founded, I think, 5 years before that. So how far along was it in sales and development at that point?
It was kind of in the $60 million in revenue or so size at the time, about a $90 million market cap. That's the financial kind of side of the business. But from a product side, it was actually the first and only company to get approval already before I joined in the concomitant, which is when you're treating atrial fibrillation while you're also treating your valve or some other ailment like a coronary bypass. And so they were the only ones in the world that actually got that approval. Everybody else in the space gave up, but Atricure had the best products in the area. Medtronic has products in the area, and then Atricure is the one that got the FDA approval through that trial. And so that was one of the things that excited me, is that they had this approval, first and only in the space. And on top of that, they also had a really rich pipeline, and they had a product for managing your left atrial appendage. And you're probably like, well, why does that matter? And it matters because in atrial fibrillation, your heart, it basically isn't beating smoothly. Mm-hmm. And when your heart doesn't beat smoothly, the blood it begins to pool. And the pooling of blood causes clots cause stroke. So you've got about a 5 or 6 times more likely chance of having a stroke if you have Afib. Where those occur is typically in something called the left atrial appendage, which is on the side of your heart. And that little pouch, unfortunately, is where a lot of that blood pools. And they had a product that basically clipped that off. And it's been a great product. It's our fastest growing product over the last 8 years. And that product was just launching when I started.
So talk a bit about your pipeline. Are you exclusively focused on Afib?
Really good question. So we have been exclusively focused on AFib, but we kind of got into a tangential market. And you're probably going to say, well, it doesn't sound like tangential, but it is when I explain it to you. We got into pain management. You're like, well, how is that really AFib? Well, one of the ways that you treat AFib surgically, and we're talking about the most complicated, difficult to treat patients with AFib. These are patients, you talked earlier about the different stages of AFib. AFib is a lot like cancer in that you've got early stage AFib, which is paroxysmal, middle stage, persistent, and then late stage, which is long-standing persistent. And we're really focused on that most complicated to treat patient. When you do that, we used to have a procedure, and we still have one, where you go in through the ribs, and you've got nerve endings there. And we thought, oh, great idea. Some doctors were using that to freeze the nerve. If you freeze the nerve, you deaden the pain for a period of time temporarily. And we're like, this is fantastic. And so we got a label for that. And we thought that would help us improve adoption of AFib surgery. Mm-hmm. But a funny thing happened along the way. It had zero impact on AFib surgery, zero. But we found out that thoracic surgeons loved to use it because it was reducing their hospital stays. These people had no pain for 6 to 8 weeks after surgery. And so anytime they're entering the thoracic cavity. So we kind of created this little business for pain management that today is now 6% of our revenue and growing. It's been growing, and we've got a new product in that area. And so now we're atrial fibrillation, and we're really all about that. But we also have this pain management business that we believe is really uniquely positioned in a world in which eventually we'll look to get something around reducing opioid consumption, et cetera. We don't have that label today, but that is the big key to it, is that you can actually reduce narcotics use afterwards, and you can reduce the length of stay.
Interesting. Why was there less interest on the AFib side as you thought? Because it does sound like a perfect fit. You're right.
It was that it didn't, we thought the problem was because of pain, and that people weren't doing the procedure because of pain. But what we learned was that they weren't doing the thoracoscopic procedure more because it's a complicated procedure to do. And it just took more skill set. So it's actually a very good product for us and approach, but it was also more complicated. And so the pain wasn't what was getting in the way. It was actually the simplicity of the procedure, which is actually one of the reasons we bought the Converge trial, because we bought that product in 2015. And that was an approach that went in through the belly, and not only didn't have pain, but it was also a lot easier for the surgeon to do.
Interesting. So how do you manage a company of this size when you mentioned Medtronic earlier, they had a potential tech in the space, but yours is a company that's focused almost exclusively on a single disease state. You have the opportunity, I'm sure, to expand in other areas, but what are the positives of having such a focused niche company in a and I mean that in a positive way. And what are the challenges of having a company that is really so focused?
And focus to me is what makes us great at the end of the day. And it really makes our people good, because they can focus on being the best, understanding exactly what's happening in the space. We can begin to see and connect dots that others aren't, because this is what 800 people in our business live, breathe about, and think about every single day. It's about AFib. It's about the patient that has AFib. And so we get into the weeds of understanding the details of that. And that's all we think about. So that focus allows us to do things and take chances, like we did on a couple of acquisitions that have really come to fruition for us. We can take those risks earlier on, as an example on that. Or our team in the field, like when we do our training, it's dedicated. Somebody's coming, they know exactly what they're going to get. It's incredibly focused on improving the way they're going to care for their patients. That focus allows us to know more than they're ever going to know, even as a practitioner, because this is all we do and this is all we see every single day. And we're seeing it at multiple different hospitals. And so it allows us to bring a knowledge base that is valuable to everybody that we talk to. We're not broad-based, just carrying a big bag and just trying to sell into a hospital. We're really focused on that patient that maybe they don't have enough time, because even a surgeon, for example, can be good at mitral valves. They can be good at coronary bypass. They can be good at aortic valves. And they've got to have all that skills. And then I've got to learn this AFib piece as well. We're there to help them bridge that. And by being that deep, it allows us to kind of add that value to the physicians that serve those patients.
And how do you weigh that? You're right. That it's great to have that tight of focus on something. You see things others don't. But how do you balance that versus perhaps the business strategy side of you that sees strength in diversification to make sure all of your eggs aren't in a single basket? Do you look for opportunities? I mean, you did talk about the pain application, so that could be one. Are you constantly looking for at least tangential opportunities that or adjacent opportunities that might fit into what you're doing? How do you balance those two things?
It's a really fair and good question, but the markets that we're serving and the number of patients that are not being treated today with this disease state is so big and so vast that would only dilute our focus on it. So when you think about the longstanding persistent atrial fibrillation space, in the US alone, there are 8 million patients with atrial fibrillation. 3.6 million of them have longstanding persistent AFib.
Wow.
We're the only ones with a solution for that. That's a lot of patients.
Yeah.
And so, and we did 1,500 or so procedures with Convergent in that area last year. I mean, when I look at it, I'm like 1,500 and 3.6 million. It's a long way for us to really begin to think about, like, if I've got to diversify per se. That being said, we've diversified within our portfolio around that patient population. So we not only do the ablation side, we also bring left atrial appendage tools. We bought a company that does it percutaneously, less invasive. We've got our clip technology. And so we've begun to diversify really around that base to make sure that that patient's getting the best care that they could possibly need. And we believe these are multi-billion-dollar markets serving millions and millions of patients that we don't have to expand. The biggest thing we look at strategically is we want to be additive to things that are going on out there. So for example, everything we do adds on to what many of the big companies are doing in the atrial fibrillation space. We don't compete against them. We just make their catheters better. And so we're adding to that. And their catheters are used in every one of our procedures as an example. And so that's how we kind of strategically think about it. So if we can find tangential things, to your point, to diversify, we might do that, but it's not a primary focus at this point. We feel like we've got a deep and rich portfolio that is not needed to kind of get too far afield from what we're doing today.
Help me understand that a bit then. On your products, they're used in conjunction with other products? They
can be. So our space, I break it down in how does a patient enter into the healthcare system? Like why are they sick and why are they talking to the physician? We kind of fall two patient profiles. One, which is the core business that we started with, which is you have a need for coronary bypass or an AVR or an MVR, or a valve procedure. And on top of that, you have AFib. That is a very distinct population that the company was founded upon. That's where we got that first label that I talked about. That's kind of population number one. That population alone isn't big enough to not diversify, to answer your question. In that case, we're not using or adding catheters to it. We're just additive to the cardiac procedure, because if you do a CABG and you have AFib and you don't treat the AFib, you don't live as long. The data is very clear that you do not live as long if you don't treat the AFib at the time that you're actually treating the other cardiovascular event or issue that you've got. And so the additive in that case is that we're adding to the treatment and helping that patient live a much longer life. And that's why in that area, we are a level 1 guideline within STS and all of the major societies. If you have AFib and you're getting treated for something else, you should get an ablation and get treated. Now, patient population 2 is the one where we're combining ourselves with the catheters. What do I mean by that? This is a patient that comes in, they've got AFib. That's all they have. They don't have some other disease state. They have atrial fibrillation. And so now it's, well, what type of AFib do they have? And how bad along that continuum are they? We talked about that earlier. And so in that case, our products, we know that one product alone does not solve the problem. So we use our products in conjunction with the catheters, and the catheters do things that our products can't do. They do it from the inside out, and ours do it from the outside in. And you combine those two and you get a much more robust and durable procedure. And that's why we're additive, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. Yep. So you had some news recently, and I want to make sure I got up. You've got the three stages of AFib, which you can recite again. The FDA recently approved your EPi-Sense system for the treatment of long-standing persistent AFib patients. What does that mean? Were you not treating long-standing persistent AFib patients before, or is this another tool to help treat those patients?
So the EPi-Sense was 510K cleared, and it was cleared for cardiac ablation and was being used in patients. So about 1,500 or so procedures were happening every year for the use of basically cardiac tissue ablation. Now, the trial that we underwent, it was about 8 years in the making to kind of from start of the trial to final approval, it was called the Converge trial. And we brought that trial to fruition. And in the process of working with the FDA, we got this label, and it's a new label that's never been had before, which is for long-standing persistent, because the data from the trial showed that patients with long-standing persistent atrial fibrillation, which means you've had AFib for more than a year, and it's about 45% of all AFib patients fall within that bucket or category. Those patients had an improvement of 110% improvement at 18 months. When you followed those patients out 18 months, you saw 110% improvement over the catheter by itself. So ours plus the catheter versus just the catheter showed that kind of improvement. And that's how we got that label. Now it's our chance to kind of really begin to go to market and market it that way, because we were never able to kind of talk about it, that you could reduce the AFib and improve that patient in that particular way. And so we've never been able to do that. We've been more reactive up to this point. Now we're able to kind of go build out and actually work with the physicians and others in a much more aggressive way to help them treat this unmet need and these patients that weren't treated before.
Gotcha. That's a very long trial. Wow. So what was the number again, the number of people who have AFib? Is it 8 million, you said?
8 million in the US, about 40 million worldwide.
And what percentage of those do you have products to treat? All of them?
We have products that treat, depending on which bucket you're in, but primarily in the long-standing persistent with Converge, it's about 45% of that patient population.
And your other products?
Our other products in the concomitant treat the persistent patients as well. And so that adds about another couple million patients to that in the United States.
So is there a population within AFib that you're unable to treat and you're currently targeting or moving toward treating?
The paroxysmal patients are ones that we're not on label to treat. The catheters are on label to treat that, and they do a great job with it. So, we're a more invasive approach than the catheters.
Gotcha.
And so there's trade-offs. And so there's a continuum of care, and the catheters do a really wonderful job of treating it. We're not trying to get into that space. We're really trying to make sure that the patients that are in this other bucket get treated. I'll give you some numbers that actually can highlight that.
Sure.
In the US, in 2019, there were 180,000 catheter ablations to treat AFib. Of those 180,000, 25,000 were for long-standing persistent patients.
Okay.
That's 14%, yet they represent 45% of the total patient population. And within that 25,000, we only did 1,500. So we have a lot of room for growth within our existing market because we're the only ones with a label to treat that patient population now. And we don't take anything away from the catheter. Again, we're additive to it. And we can treat a whole bunch of patients that they had given up on. They'd said, you know what, we're not going to treat. So we're not, at this point, trying to go after a space that already has really good solutions to them, and we're not trying to kind of change that game at this point in time. Our focus is really making sure we can create standards of care where we are. And
where are these procedures being done? Are they primarily in larger hospitals? Do you see ASCs treating AFib? Where are you selling to?
They're definitely being done in hospitals. They're not going to be done in outpatient centers. There is a hospital stay component to it. It can be anywhere from 2 to 5 days or so, depending on the procedure and obviously the patient, et cetera. But they are being done in a hospital. So there's about 1,000 or so hospitals that are potential to do this procedure. For example, in our concomitant space, we sell and we are in pretty much about 98% of all cardiac surgery centers in the United States. Atricure has a presence because we're the only ones with the label in the PMA label in that space as well.
I feel like I should get a sound effect for the COVID question coming. How did your business fare during COVID? Was this a procedure that was deemed essential and people continue to have it, or did people put themselves at risk by not having this procedure done?
So good question. So in different parts, it was a little bit different. So in the cardiac surgery part of our business, we had less of an impact because patients that are going in for coronary bypass, they've probably had a heart attack or they've had some other major ailment that they've got to basically treat pretty quickly. Yes, the cardiac surgery got hit hard, but not as hard as the elective ablation procedures that were happening on the convergent side, which is what that is. That's only for convergent. And so we were hit harder on that. So we did get affected last year, like everybody else in the April-May timeframe. saw a bounce back in the summer, saw some pressure in December, January, and then we just announced our results recently, and we've really seen things begin to come back. March was exceptional, and so was April for us. And so we're really on a great trajectory right now to kind of see our way through as these procedures begin to bounce back.
That's terrific. So where do you go from here? Again, you're a company with an extremely great, tight focus on a space. How do you plan for Atricure's future? Is it acquiring more companies? Is it potentially being acquired? Obviously, anything can happen, but how do you view the future of this company?
Yeah, we're focused on creating a standard of care within the markets that we're in right now. There are too few patients being treated today. We're talking in the millions of patients. Everything we do over the next 5 years is going to be about creating a standard of care for the treatment of those patients that are not getting treated today. Are there acquisitions that might be able to help us out? There might be, but it's not a proactive measure at this point in time, maybe to get better channel strength and things like that. But we're really focused on helping physicians understand the benefits of the treatment we've got in front of them today and executing on that and helping them build those programs. Are your
salespeople in the room when these procedures are happening? And has that been, I'll just leave my question there. Are they in the operating room during this procedure?
They are. We are in the operating room for almost all the procedures, primarily because, as I was talking before, we're so focused.
Yeah.
There's a lot of value we provide to them during the procedure. Obviously, we're not doing the procedure, but we've seen more procedures than they've ever seen before. So our counsel is really important. We train our team really well to kind of be in there and be supportive through pretty much every one of the procedures.
And has that access been affected at all by COVID restrictions?
Fortunately, that is not. We've been really welcomed because we're such a core part of the team and so helpful and valuable. We have not seen that affect right up front. For the first couple of weeks when they just went into complete lockdowns, but that came back very quickly.
Okay. And final question, just about the money. I imagine that reimbursement for this is stable. I mean, it's kind of hard to argue against this being something that needs to be paid for.
Yeah, fortunately, there's really good reimbursement for this today. And so like a lot of companies, when they're bringing new products or they get new pieces, they've got to kind of go fight for the reimbursement angle to it. Fortunately for this is actually a well reimbursed. Everybody wins. The patient wins. The hospitals can do this without losing money, and the physicians have payment as well. So it's a win-win for everybody involved.
Excellent. All right. Well, Mike Carrel, I'm glad you found your way into the medtech industry, and really appreciate you taking some time to talk about Atricure.
Hey, thanks, Tom. I really appreciate you inviting me in, and I've enjoyed it.
All right, Sean Hooley, great job bringing in the young folks. I could see our numbers popping. So I really love the energy you're bringing, but we may have to bring Chris Newmarker back in again just to level things off next week. But great job filling in. And I know you're out there on social media. How can folks find you on Twitter and LinkedIn?
So you can find me on LinkedIn at Sean, Sean, Hooley, Whooley. Always trying to grow that network. So feel free to send a LinkedIn request. And then on Twitter, I am at the same name, Sean Hooley, WTWH. That's my Twitter handle. So feel free to throw me a follow there too.
Awesome. And I am also on LinkedIn, Tom Salemi. I'm on Twitter at MedTechTom. And thanks for joining us on this podcast. Please do share it on those social media channels. And if you do, tag myself, tag Chris Newmarker. He is at Newmarker on Twitter, or Chris Newmarker on LinkedIn. And of course, tag Sean Hooley, who he just gave you his information just a few seconds ago. Also, you can get this podcast before almost anyone else does by subscribing. Push the subscribe button on one of your podcast applications, Google, Spotify, Amazon, Apple. We got them all the biggies. Just push subscribe, and these podcasts will be sent directly to you pretty much as soon as I publish them. So it's a great and easy and free service. So why not just do that? And that's a wrap. Tune in next week. We'll have another great episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast waiting for you. Great job, Sean Hooley.
Appreciate it. Always happy to join.